Hello, everybody. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. How are you? I do hope you are safe and well. And if you are, or family members recovering or in the midst of, our prayers are with you. You are in the right place. Tonight is Thursday night, and it is our Timbuktu report. And my guest tonight, as every night, is Dr. Rick Stevenson, who is a
Hello.
professor of African American history and African American studies at the University of Florida. Thank you, sir, for including us in your schedule this evening.
Thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure being here. Always fun and wonderful. And you are looking wonderful tonight. I love the kitchen. Are you going to cook for us?
Well, there is some food that's already prepared, but I am so looking forward to hearing you tell me and all of our listeners
Oh,
where this cuisine came from, because this is the holiday season of preparing meals and the time around the table, the days of yesteryear. You know, I'm the 11th of 13 children. And so when my mother cooked, everybody came to the table at the same time. Now, mind you, we were all not home at the same time.
yeah,
Those who were there, everybody ate at the table. I mean, the meal was a really, really special time in
absolutely.
households. And I believe that the breakdown of that table time, that family time, has contributed to the breakdown of the family. We have enjoyed some incredible cuisine, the soul food that we think about, the
Yeah,
African American cuisine that birthed Southern hospitality.
absolutely. Absolutely. And as you mentioned, in the African context, food is not just about a meal. It's about fellowship. It's about creativity. It's figuring out how to use different spices. And when you have different ethnic groups like the Ghanaians and the Yoruba and the Hausa, and they would get together and fix their meals, they would bring these different flavors, man, many of which we have access to today. Some that came over here on the ships, and then some that were created once they got here. Some of the greatest chefs of the early 17th, 18th century were African chefs. They cooked for the presidents. They cooked in the houses of their enslavers. So we have a great history of culinary arts, if you will.
Absolutely. And we learned how to make something out of nothing.
Out of nothing.
And so before we go into this show, Dr. Rick Stevenson is also a theologian. And as we do every Thursday,
Yeah.
Dr. Stevenson, take us to the Lord in prayer.
Amen. Lord, thank you for another week. We are blessed that we have the opportunity to experience another 7 days. There are so many people who have lost their lives even today. Today was the largest death rate of persons connected to COVID-19. And so we pray for those families. We pray for all those husbands and wives and children, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers who lost or were lost. And we just pray in the name of Jesus that you will bless this time as well, that our minds might be expanded by this new information about our culture, about our culinary skills, and about what it means to be an African chef in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Dr. Stevenson, thank you so very much. And as we are here to talk about food, we are very sensitive to the fact that there are so many families across this community and across the country who are experiencing food insecurity.
Absolutely.
And what a nice, delicate term. When I was growing up, it was just poor and you were starving. And
Yeah.
so I want to say it that way so we can really understand the need. There are families who are starving in the United States of America.
Literally.
I talked to a grandmother just today. She said, we went to pick up our grandchildren, and my little 5-year-old grandson said, Granddaddy, I'm so glad you're here because we're so hungry.
Lord have mercy.
Just 2 or 3 hours ago.
Have mercy.
So I don't take it lightly that God has blessed that we have something to eat, and thank God for those agencies and churches throughout our communities that are providing food for families that are hurting and
Sure.
need food. So thank you to all of those, from Bishop Stokes and Micanopy to the Neighborhood Christian Center and Joanne Ballard and Effie and all of her crew that answer the needs of people in Memphis, and Marshall Temple Church of God in Gary, Indiana, Passage Family Church here in Gainesville, just to name a few. They're all over the country. And so thank God for those people who are willing to put themselves in harm's way.
Yeah.
That's another frontline position of people who are answering the need of those who are hungry. Not just
Absolutely.
food insecurity. It's really nice. It's a nice way to say it, but people
Absolutely.
are hungry. People are hungry and people are
Absolutely.
dying. So we don't take that lightly. As
No.
we talk about, Dr. Stevenson, as we talk about what the Africans did in this country as far as food, even in that time of being oppressed during slavery, well, let's just back it up, sir. On
Yeah.
the ship,
Say it again.
on the ship,
Yeah, all the way up on the ship. I mean,
from the Middle Passage. What was taking place then, Dr. Stevenson?
a lot of, well, one of the things that occurred on the slave ships was about food, and that is the diets that the Europeans were accustomed to was much different than that of the continental Africans. And so one of the things we learned as we look at the Middle Passage and this transportation of African peoples is the need to change the diet and to bring food items that they were accustomed to. And so slave ship cargoes brought crops directly from Africa to North America. These crops included things like rice, okra, tanya, black-eyed peas. I was just telling my wife today, I want to make some black-eyed peas with turkey neck bones. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait.
Is that going to be your New Year's Day
That's what it's
meal?
going to be. I'm telling you right now. But I don't know about you. When I was growing up, my grandmother used to say that couldn't nobody come into the house until somebody tossed their hat through the door. Remember that? Did you do that? That a man had to cross the threshold, and someone had to toss their hat in the door
For good luck.
before they could do anything. That's how you start the new year out, But kidney beans, lima beans, watermelon, sorghum. I mean, these are the kinds of plantains, that's famous in Jamaica and the Caribbean islands. These various foodstuffs came from Africa. Yams, and many of these items we found on the slave ships. And we have primary source documents that even give us the quantities. They argued that the average African onboard ship, they had to collect at least 200 sweet potatoes per person in order to bring that enough food across the Atlantic. Because remember now, sometimes the trek from West Africa to North America may take it anywhere between 30 to 90 days, right? And sometimes there would be anywhere between 75,000 to 100,000 yams, roughly 200 per person, on a slave ship. John Brabo, one of the slave ship captains and writers of primary sources during that period, talks about in 1754 that they brought anywhere between 150 to 200 yams per person on board ship. The ship log from the slave ship Elizabeth from 1754 documents this. So we know that some of the food that we eat today came straight from the continent, various types of rice meals and food and fish meals. So, our people were not only brought here to work in the field, but we literally participated in laying the foundation to what we call Southern cuisine.
So you said they had to change the cuisine because what the Europeans were eating, it was costing them as far as cargo. As
Say it again.
is your I'm getting some feedback? Can you turn
Yes.
it down a little bit? Maybe I'll take. Can you're having trouble hearing?
I just lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, thank you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that causing feedback, I wonder?
I don't know what it is.
So, Doc, you were saying that they had to change what they were feeding the slaves.
Yeah, yes,
I
yeah,
mean, sweet
yeah,
potatoes.
yeah. Because they were getting sick. Some of the food that the Europeans fixed as daily meals was entirely different to what the African was accustomed to. And so not only were they undernourished, but when they were nourished with the foods they weren't accustomed to, they got sick. Then you have to take into account disease like yellow fever, diphtheria, all types of diseases being on the ship. So you combine 100 degrees in the belly of the ship,
Belly.
combine laying in excrement, you combine the lack of nourishment that you're accustomed to, and you have a perfect recipe for seasickness that is unsurmountable. Now I'm a diver, and and oftentimes, several times, en route to a dive site, I've gotten seasick. So I take Dramamine to prevent it. And normally the dive, we leave 6 o'clock in the morning, we might be out for 8 or 10 hours. But imagine laying on your left side or your right side for 30 or 60 days, chained to someone, and then not being nourished. Seasickness is one of the worst experiences I think a person can ever have. And there's a lot of things that can make your body sick, but seasickness, it is horrible. So one of the ways of attempting to counteract that was to adjust the diets and to bring foods on the ships that one would last. Remember, they didn't have refrigeration.
Right.
So they couldn't have like meat or pork or beef. So you find a lot of vegetables, goobers, which are peanuts, these kinds of foods that would last the journey.
So, was it more customary that the African diet was closer to a vegetarian diet than a
Pretty
meat-based
much.
diet?
Well, it depends, because that's a great question. One of the things that we fail to realize about African peoples, or peoples especially during that time period, that their food sources were seasonal, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you may have eaten watermelons in say August, but you ate plantains in the fall.
Right.
So your diet would change basically according to what was being grown, what was being caught, right? What was being hunted. Because remember, I've experienced this. I went to Senegal, West Africa, several years ago, and we went to this village. It was maybe 100 miles in towards Mali, and the woman actually went out to the corral. She caught a goat, killed it, skinned it, and like 3 hours later, we ate it. And
No
it was amazing.
preservatives necessary.
And here's the deal. There was no chemicals, no salt preserves, no MSG, none of that stuff. And what we fail to realize today is a lot of what we're eating has been infiltrated by chemicals. You look at some of these chickens. Some of those chickens aren't supposed to be as big as they are. They're on steroids. You take a piece. If you know about fish, if you go fishing and you catch fish and then you bring it home, unless you freeze it, that fish is not going to last that long, right?
Right.
But then you go to a grocery store and you buy fish that's been there for 4 months, or it has a sell by date. Something's in that fish to preserve it, which means it's not good for your body, right? These people ate foods that were not contaminated, and so therefore they were a lot healthier than we would ever imagine, because the food was so fresh, and because they understood how to produce it, but also how to cure it, and also how to go out and get it so that it was, same day meals, if you will. So,
You mentioned they had watermelons and they had plantains, but they ate them in season. And it was said once that if we ate what was in season in our region of the country, that we
Right.
would even be healthier. Or if you
Exactly.
cannot, as in the case with some things that people would do, like for instance, because I'm here in my kitchen and I just want to show you some things that I still do that my mother did. Like this is my container of sauerkraut. I have
Yeah.
so one of the things that they would do was ferment vegetables.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
sauerkraut was one of those things,
Sure.
and pickles and other fruits and vegetables. So, this is my container of sauerkraut,
Right.
and it is very, very tasty,
Yeah.
and it's good for my tummy.
Yeah. And
You've
you
got
know
to,
what?
what's that?
Also, the cooking utensils. That's an enamel crock pot, isn't it?
Mm, it's a clay pot. It's
A
a
clay
like
pot.
the
Yeah.
churn, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Even the utensils, they use cast iron cooking utensils, right?
Right.
I have my whenever I do like fried chicken or fried fish, I cook with cast iron. And if you season a cast iron, that's a language I bet you some of these young kids don't even know that you have to season. There you go.
Season the cast
You
iron
got to
skillet.
season that thing right there.
That's right.
you
That's
know,
right.
because if you're using Teflon or some of these newer materials, you can get all kinds of carcinogens in your food. But cast iron, it will add iron to your food, but also it keeps the heat properly. It's a better cooking utensil. And so these also are the kinds of things that African peoples used that kind of developed and laid the foundation for what we now call soul food. Also, outdoor cooking. Can I share my screen for a second? I'm going to show you.
Absolutely. 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 Share screen. There you go.
Okay.
And so while you're doing that, this is a cookbook that I have. It's called The Old Black Pot. And there is an African
Yeah.
American woman at the stove, a wooden stove, cooking out of that black pot. There's a black skillet over there on the wall.
Yeah.
The metal teapot or a coffee pot, rather, over on the stove. And so, you know, the closer we eat to where we came from, the dirt.
Exactly.
So iron is a natural substance. Teflon is not.
It is not.
So the
It is
closer you eat to where you came from, the healthier you will be. And as there's so much talk about whether or not we'll get a vaccine for COVID, in the meantime, I will say it over and over again.
Oh,
Whatever you can do to build your immune system,
yeah.
focus on your immune system rather than just waiting for a vaccine to come,
Yeah.
because you need to be focusing on taking care of your body. That will help you fight COVID and anything else that will come your way. So do the things that will take care of your immune system. What do you have there, Doc?
I can't, for some odd reason. I need to be on a different browser to share my screen. But I've been doing. Say again.
Is that doing it now? Can you do it now?
Let me see. Uh, it says I have to change my browser.
What about there? No, that one won't work either.
Yeah, no. Yeah, because I'm on Firefox, and it's telling me I need to be on Chrome or
Right.
or yeah, and I'm not. So anyway, well, what I wanted to share with you was I've been collecting narratives, slave narratives of that focus on cooking, and this one particular narrative from the United Works Project says this: most of the cooking was in an oven in the yard,
Mm-hmm.
bed of coals. They had baked possum, groundhog in the oven, stewed rabbits, fried fish, fired bacon called streak meat, and all kinds of vegetables, boiled cabbage, pone. I bet you know what pone cornbread is.
I bet I do.
What is it?
My daddy was born in 1912 or something like that. And do you know what a hoe cake is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Give me a pong of that cornbread, or Daddy would say, "Yeah, I'll go in there and make some hoe cakes." Well,
That's right.
it didn't dawn on me, because my daddy, my parents were church going people, and to call something a hoe,
Right.
it wasn't until later that I realized
It wasn't
hoe
somebody in
cake,
the club.
huh?
It wasn't somebody in the club.
No, but a hoe cake is a quick cake.
That's right. That's right. And they used
Cook
to
it on
dip
top of the
it.
stove in a black skillet.
That's right. And dip it in molasses.
That's right. Butter
That's
it and
right.
pour some molasses over it,
Right. Right.
and that would be sometimes our dessert.
That's
Good
right.
food.
You ever had sweet milk?
Sweet
Sweet
milk,
buttermilk?
sweet buttermilk.
Yeah, buttermilk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not. We had it, but I didn't drink it.
Yeah. My grandmother used to
Some
have the butter.
cornbread.
Yep. And it would rise to the top. So, but my point is that even the way they prepared the food, one, because of the technology, right? It's nothing like we had today, but it was cooked it outside. And so it didn't have all the lead contaminants from the paints on the walls and stuff like that. These are the kinds of things that we ought to be teaching our kids, right? One of the things that my dad was a chef,
Hmm.
and he taught all of us to cook. He told us, you might marry somebody who can't cook, who don't like to cook. So, and even if you don't get married, you are able to feed yourself.
Right.
And so he would literally sit us down, come on here and sit down at this table. Let me show you how to do that. He would show us how to make, biscuits from scratch and stuff like that. And it was a wholesome food. Was not just about food. It was about relationship, right? It was about building camaraderie within the context of the family or the community, and that's another thing that we miss about African cooking. There were certain people in the neighborhood we couldn't wait to get to their house when it was time to eat,
Right. Right.
because Miss Smith had the best spare ribs and yams you could find in town, right? And that's what food is to Africa. It's not just the meal, it's the ability and the time to invest in someone else, because that's what we did. I don't know about you, but when I was coming up, we would sit around the table and my parents would ask us, "So how was your day?" And each of us had to share how we did in school, or they wanted to know what our future thoughts were. That's what food is about. It's not just about eating a meal. It's about creating an opportunity to receive and invest in the lives of the people in your village.
And speaking of the people in your village, is that do you hear feedback?
I did just now.
Is your audio on, or is it not?
I'm going to hold on for a second. Let me try this. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a little better. And
Okay.
even not just the sharing of the sit down meal, but those sisters who would get together and exchange recipes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that has been lost as well. Now, I have my mother's cream cheese pound cake recipe. Now, I typed it on a brother's typewriter. I called her and got it over the phone.
Yeah.
Hard to see it with a light.
Yeah. I
But
can
do you
see.
see how greasy it is and how
Yeah.
it's been used? But I
Yeah.
refuse to retype it over because it reminds me that I got it from my mother in the
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah.
And I typed it out.
Yeah.
And I've had
Man,
the blessed opportunity to be able to share it with other friends of mine and family members who want to know, hey, Pam, Comer, Scott, and it's just always wonderful to have an excuse to have a slice of cream cheese pound cake.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have one tonight. I've been trying to stay away from it because
Go ahead, please.
I love eating during the holidays, especially between Thanksgiving and
Yeah.
so
That's
cream cheese pound cake is on there.
That's why you have to go to the gym every day. My wife and I work out together. She's trying to get me nice and slim.
I haven't been going to the gym. I'm
So,
doing a detox tea, but I haven't been going to the gym.
we have a gym here at the house. So
Okay, in the house.
she's pretty good too. She's got her little music and everything, trying to work her brother out. But you mentioned typing the recipes down. Now my dad cooked from memory. So I never had a recipe. I just knew what it was supposed to taste like.
Right. Well, and my
And I
daddy
still
would say
use
that. My
recipes.
daddy would say, the taste is on my tongue.
Exactly.
So Pam Scott, do you cook with a recipe? Because that sister can throw down too.
Is that right?
I've seen the pictures, but Pam's never invited me over to eat. So when I go back to Jackson, Tennessee, I'm looking forward to an invitation. I've seen pictures. Pam and I've seen how you smile, so I know you've eaten some good. And there's so many people who are posting things on social media today.
Right now?
Well, showing off the cuisine that they're
Oh yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah.
because they're home and because of COVID. And there are people who are cooking more. There are people who had been dining out more frequently that are doing that less now.
Sure.
And it'll be interesting to hear how that's going for families, because I think that, especially in this day and time when we're not doing that very much, that
Yeah.
COVID has forced us to come back home and eat,
Sure.
get back to
Sure.
that family event that helped to strengthen the family. As you said, food, the African American experience or the African experience with food was not just about the eating.
Right, right, right. It was about the fellowship. But if I can shift gears just to throw in one more aspect of it, and that is that European Americans benefited from the African culinary skills. One of the most famous African chefs in America, his name was Hercules. He was the chef for George Washington.
Mm.
And this guy was phenomenal. He cooked for him while he was in Virginia on a plantation, and then he also cooked in the White House that was in Philadelphia. But this guy was so good that people from all across the world would send their chefs to Philadelphia to learn from him. He was just that.
Wow.
And there were so many others that don't make it into the history books. And so I think that as we talk about food, we also ought to talk about the pioneers of the culinary arts, and how they learned how to use various types of spices and to create these flavors that we're so accustomed to. I can't think of the book right now. I just saw it the other day. I was going to pick it up and I didn't. But it's a new book on Southern cooking that focuses primarily on meals on the plantation. And I'd seen the young lady on Zoom give a presentation, but I said I wanted to get the book and I didn't. But I think that is another aspect of our history that is so underrepresented, and that is a lot of what we call Southern cooking. Our great great grandparents are the ones who did that stuff.
Yeah. And even as we have talked about eating animal intestines.
Chitlins.
Right. But they also ate, some people ate the chicken intestines.
Yeah, yeah.
And other animals' intestines. But it wasn't just the Africans who ate that, because, the story goes that the African was given the stuff that their master didn't want to eat. And then we figured out all of these various cuisines, like
Right.
hog head cheese. You
Right.
know what hog head cheese is?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, taking the head, the snout, various parts, and seasoning it
That's right.
and pressing it down in a churn or
Mm-hmm.
whatever they used,
Mm-hmm.
and cooking that head down and seasoning it and making up some slice meat that they call hog head cheese.
Exactly.
But the intestines were also a big part of what the African ate, as well as preparing it for their slave owners.
Yeah, they ate, but they ate that before they came here. As a
Right.
matter of fact, I tell you what, I went to, I was in South Africa. I was there doing some teaching in a high school, And we had gone to this restaurant in Soweto, and they served tripe. Now, I will never eat that again as long as Jesus sits on the throne.
I've heard of that.
Oh, it was one of the worst tastes I've ever had in my mouth.
What is it again? What is it?
Tripe, Tripe.
I know, but what is it?
It's part of the intestine.
Which animal?
The pig. Yeah,
Okay.
tripe. Yeah, it's horrible. I will never eat again.
I know about the chitlins, the hog maul, part of the stomach.
That's the stomach. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, I will never do it again. And you know, I don't eat chitlins and hog maws anymore because I just don't want to eat the pork. But I would eat that before I'd eat tripe. I don't even know. I mean, just the thought of it would make me sick in my stomach. But my point is that these kinds of delicacies were part of the Africans' diet before they got here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't simply the master throwing it away. If the master threw it away, it's primarily because he didn't have to cook it. It wasn't because he, you know what I'm saying to you? Because if you go to the grocery store now and try to buy chitlins, they're like $25 a pound.
Too much. And guess what? They washed them too clean. They don't have any taste to them anymore.
They don't even taste right. And you have to
You
know.
can't smell them. When you cook chitlins, you're supposed to stink up the house. That's some good guts.
But you gotta wash them. You have to wash them properly.
Of course.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But you need a little corn husk in there to give them flavor. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but you know, my point is that we brought some of these delicacies and the ways of seasoning and cooking and cleaning them with us. My point is that oftentimes when we talk about enslaved individuals, we primarily focus on picking cotton, harvesting tobacco, maybe growing rice or harvesting sugar. But for the most part, we brought our intellect as well, right? There was a brain drain that was going on in Africa as well. We brought the skill on how to plant this rice, how to plant these plantains, how to grow the potatoes, how we knew when to harvest the watermelon. So there's a much bigger picture than just these cotton pickers, if you will. We brought intellect and technology. We even brought tools like the one-hand hoe with us. Again, we go back to this whole thing. But it was an instrument that we used to furrow the ground. So, when we talk about cooking, we can't just limit it to the meal. We also have to talk about the process and the techniques that it took to grow the food or catch the food that we ended up cooking and flavoring in such a way.
So Dr. Stevenson, when you say that this is part of history that gets overlooked, it reminds me of the hoop skirt that the Southern Belle is credited for. But when in fact it was the slave woman who took the big metal rings off of the flour barrels and sewed flour sacks over those rings. It was actually an anti-rape device so that their behinds wouldn't show as much. And then their madams wanted them to make them what they had.
Exactly.
And then it gets credited to the Southern Belles.
Yeah.
But it was the Black women, it was the slave women who made those slips, just as Paula Deen.
Yes.
Lord help the Holy Ghost. How in the world does Paula Deen's name become synonymous with Southern cooking? She wasn't even cooking during that time. Her folks were not cooking.
I can't tell you.
We were cooking. We were doing the cooking, yet it does not become acceptable or mainstream or marketable, it doesn't become marketable if she looks like this cooking it, but she could cook.
Exactly.
This is a thought that was gifted to me by our friend Robin. Thank you, Robin. And when I look at these things, even though they may be caricatures, I think
Yeah,
of these women as hardworking women who laid
absolutely.
the foundation for the cuisine that we're talking about today, the soul food
Exactly.
that we still enjoy today, the soul food that Southern hospitality is known for is because of these women.
That's right. That's
Robin,
right.
not Paula
And,
Deen.
and that's one of the reasons that I encourage my students to do PhDs, because we have to increase the influx of scholarship around the work that our foreparents did from the view of a person who could have been related to the person we're studying. It amazes me, and don't get me wrong, there are some European scholars who have done some very significant work when it comes to Black studies and so on. But I just think that as a Black scholar myself and studying African American studies, I bring a different lens to the way I even look at the data. My questions and my concerns, my emotions, are tied up into the way I express what I compose and what I write. And I just think that you're right. Paula Deen may have been a great cook, but whatever she learned if somebody passed it down from one of our grandparents.
Right.
And I think that's important. But you mentioned earlier too about eating in the rhythm of the seasons. They knew when the wild fruits were being uh, harvested. They knew how to track certain types of fish. They had these harvest seasons, and that also meant they had to understand science.
Mm-hmm.
You get my point? And again, I think that what we fail to realize when we simplify the conversation around food is that there was a lot that went on to make sure that that food was edible, that it was tasty, and even the one pot meal, for instance. Other cultures have done that, but man, there is nothing like some jambalaya, man, or some gumbo, where you got one big pot and everything but the kitchen sinks in that pot. You know
And
what I mean?
you know how to put it together to make it finger licking good for real.
Come on, man. Come on,
And
man.
speaking of gumbo, I lived in New Orleans for a while, and tonight I actually had something that I learned to eat in New Orleans. I had some people over, and I had fried corn, cornbread, purple peas, some turnip greens, and they sit down at the table, and one of my friends said, "Where's the rice?" I said,
Yeah.
"For what?"
Yeah.
Because I have to have rice with my greens. I was like,
Yeah.
rice with your greens?
Yeah.
And this whole thing of rice that you talked about, one of the grains that the African brought into this culture. And so I had to cook some rice before we could proceed. Well, tonight I actually had some turnip greens and rice.
Are you kidding me?
Turnip greens and rice, not only that, but they served chitlins over a bed of rice.
Yeah.
You ever had
Rice is rice was I've not eaten it. I know of it, but rice, my grandmother on my mother's side, rice was a staple. Millet was a staple in Africa. I mean,
that?
almost all matter of fact, jambalaya is a rice dish.
Right.
And so a lot of those meals were based primarily on rice. One, because of nutrition, but two, because it grew so fervently in the South, right? So
And it sticks to your ribs.
it sticks to your ribs, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, good
Speaking,
stuff. Good stuff.
speaking to
Of
the
course,
ribs.
huh?
So speaking of sticking to the ribs, now I'm getting hungry.
Even just in preparing for the show, I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted to go ahead and eat something so that
Yeah,
I wouldn't get off of here and then want to be so hungry to space down in the plate.
exactly.
Tonight we're talking about the Southern cuisine, in the United States of America and the unsung chefs
Yeah.
of the Southern hospitality and the African cuisine. And I'm gonna tell you, we we could count on that at family reunions
Yeah.
and at the repast.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
But guess what, Doc? Everybody's going to Walmart to get their pies and cakes and chicken.
That's right.
It's really kind of messed up the repast.
Listen, man. Until my dad passed last year. He was 90 years old.
Wow.
But every Christmas, my father would fix breakfast, eggs, bacon, sausage, waffles, hominy grits, catfish, and then he would fix dinner, ham, turkey, potatoes, sweet potatoes, potato salad, yam. I mean, you name it. And my entire family would make a circuit. We would make these circuits from my dad's house to my aunt's house to my grandmother's house because we had food from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night.
Wasn't that fun?
Oh my goodness. It was, I mean, I would come home for, that's the only time I come home from college was to eat.
Well, and I can appreciate that. That's what we did with my mother's table. And it was also good to be able to partake from other people in our family, like my Aunt Mildred and cousin Selma and other women who were cooking. And we don't have a lot of those good, Diane is still in Meaden. She's a good cook. And Millie said that she can make a carrot cake. Do you like carrot cake?
I do.
Millie.
I like carrot cake.
Yeah, she says that she makes a mean carrot cake.
What's her name?
Sigan.
She needs to put something in the chats. She needs to send some carrot cake FedEx to
I know. I told her I was going to get her to make me one and FedEx it to me. I love good carrot cake. And you think about it. Think about how we come together and our memories are surrounding certain foods.
Sure.
Or certain stories. Or just as you just talked about your father preparing in the morning and then that circuit of people coming through to say hello. How you doing, Auntie? How you doing, Uncle? And what do they say? Go in there and fix you a plate.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
And one of my friends said he would go to his grandmother's house and he said inevitably his grandmother would say, "Boy, can you eat something?" See? "No, Grandma, I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask you if you were hungry. I asked you if you could eat."
Right.
Hunger has nothing to do with it.
Wait, did your parents can foods like apples and potatoes and peaches? Yeah, mason jars. The first time I ever had corn liquor was in a mason jar.
This was a staple in the African American kitchen as well. This jar, because we didn't have refrigerators.
That's right.
And normally I would put sauerkraut in this, or I do watermelon rind pickle.
Oh, okay.
But when we were using these glass jars and not plastic.
Do you know why they use that mason jar?
Tell me.
Because it had that lip on it that when you closed it, it kept the air out. That's why there's a lid that has a rubber washer inside of it that when you close the top down on it, there you go. Mm-hmm. That right there is what helps seal.
That's right.
And you could take some apples that I had to go pick out the tree, and she would cut them, clean them, put them in that jar, put them in the basement, and 6 months later she would say, "Now go down there on the second shelf and give me that."
That's right.
That third jar of apples.
And see, when I talk about us eating in season, when we ate out of season, the only way that we could eat out of season would be because of canning.
Exactly.
There would be corn. People would put corn, green beans, tomatoes, the pickles, the sauerkraut. And
That's right.
so while we were eating out of season, we were getting good fermented food that was still alive,
That's right.
wasn't dried, wasn't
Absolutely.
pasteurized. It still had good enzymes in it. And it was just so much healthier for
It
us.
was awesome. There's a book. There is another book. It's called what's the title of this book? I'll find the title, but the author says this. She says, exploring cuisine in Africa as something conceived, cooked, and consumed first around the home fires, the cook pots, the griddles, the spits. A spit was another cooking instrument, but later in the market stalls. She says, eating together communally was thus the nutrition for the human soul.
Ah,
That the food was the nutrition for the body, but eating together
yes, I like that.
for the human soul,
With the
right?
nutrition for the soul.
You know, and one of the things I appreciate about my wife and I is we eat together every day.
Wonderful.
Every day. And sometimes and she's the smoothie queen now. She's made some of the best smoothies on the planet. I can only imagine how good she would have been as a canner if she knew how to do some of that stuff to my grandmother. Because she's a perfectionist, right? So
Wow.
once she starts working on it, she wants to make sure it's right, it's consistent, you know. So imagine what it would have been like if she was born back in
Not
the
too
80s.
late.
It would have been crazy.
Not too late, Victoria. You can still do it, my girl, my sister. You can still do it. I'll show you how to make some sauerkraut. Now, do you like sauerkraut?
I really don't like it that much. I like it on hot dogs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I think is commercial sauerkraut is different than what you make at home. And one of the reasons that I started making it at home is because some sauerkraut, they actually put sugar in it.
Yeah. And sugar is not too good for your body.
No, no, and it defeats the purpose of having this fermented vegetable with all these great live enzymes, and then you put sugar with it. So I think that, and you still may not like it, but I think that if you can incorporate it, even just chopping it up over your salad, just to get that in your system, get that in your gut. It's good for your gut health. So, Dr.
Okay.
Stevenson, as we're talking about the African American cuisine, the Southern cuisine that is known the world over, and the flavors are second to none.
Second to none.
Yeah, yeah. When I lived in New Orleans, I used to say you really have to work hard to find a bad plate of food
Yeah.
because they know what to do with the pot. They can
It's
season
the
the pot.
spices. It's the spices. It's the spices. It's the limes and the peppers and the palm oil, the maize. I mean, we season our food. Yep. We season our food differently than other cultures. I've been to places that cook yams, and when they come out, they're not really yams. They there's something about the flavor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a yam when they pulled it out of the ground,
Exactly. But
but they
once
did something to it. They missed a step.
they did something to it. And I think that's another part of it. If you go, for instance, if you've been to Jamaica,
hmm
okay, so you've had jerk chicken.
hmm
If you go to almost any place in the West Indies and have jerk chicken, it almost tastes the same
Yeah.
because they use similar spices, right? They
Uh-huh.
use similar cooking, the heat, the way they cook it. You know, it's the seasoning that we bring to the table that a lot of people miss, right? And that's another problem I think, and I'm only guesstimating now, that happened in Africa. The way that the English seasoned their food was entirely different than the way that Black people were accustomed to seasoning their food, right? And I would dare say that some of the peppers and stuff that we use was also good for your system, for your digestive system. So I think that again, when we talk about cooking from an African perspective, when we're looking at the culinary skills of our foreparents, we have to understand that there was a technology and a creativity that went into these every single meal that was wrapped in love, man. And between the love and the seasoning and the fellowship, man, life was crazy, but the food was off the chart.
Life was crazy, but the fellowship for the soul was what sustained us and preserved us and gave us a reason to get up and go on and see what the end is going to be, because part of the end was another Sunday at the table.
Exactly.
My friend Carrie Knox in Jackson, Tennessee says, yes, seasoning is the key.
That's
Because I was at a conference in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I saw the sign that they were going to have a seafood buffet. Well, I had lived in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I'm there and I'm like, oh, because, I'm thinking about crawfish burls, as they call it, and, the shrimp, the potatoes, the turkey necks, the neck bones that they'll throw in that corn on the cob. Man, I went through there and I piled my plate. So unladylike. I piled my plate high enough that I would not even resemble a lady, okay? And I was ready to throw down. I took the first bite of that shrimp that tastes like they had just washed it.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was so disappointed.
You know it. Yeah.
And it was in that moment I was like, oh my goodness, I see why people come to the South and eat Southern cuisine.
That's right.
And they're like, oh my goodness, this tastes so good. Well, maybe it doesn't taste so good. It's just that it has a taste.
Exactly. At all.
At all.
Exactly. It's interesting. I was sharing with my wife just, I guess about a week ago. I haven't done a seafood broil in maybe 10, 15 years, but I used to do them quite frequently. Crabs and lobster and clams and oysters and corn and oh man, on a big pot. Oh, and you just, oh my goodness, that's living.
Oh yeah.
Crack the crab legs open and
when you're eating and you're not worried about there's something on your mouth right here.
Exactly. You just put a bib on and go.
Because there's something on your mouth too, and your mouth and your mouth. And I've gone to those crawfish boils in New Orleans where they bring the big pot in and they dump it out on newspaper.
On newspaper, right? Brown paper bags.
Whatever you got.
That's right. And you just go for what you know, and you just sit there until everything is gone.
Or till you can't move. and then on top of that, as one of my friends would say, when they would all get together and somebody was saying, where's Uncle Bubba? He out there in the tree lying, out there with all the rest of them lying. Because right?
Yep.
They get full and they go tell their stories.
That's right. That's the fact. That's it. Hanging out on the porch, that's what we do. And so I think that as we think about the culinary experiences of our foreparents, as devastating as and horrific as slavery was, it reveals to us the tenacity and the ingenuity of a people who learn how to do much with little.
Yeah.
And that their hope, even though their meals were limited, they understood that if I can just make it one more day, one more meal, somebody else is going to be okay. And I think that's why the holidays were so important back in the day. I was just telling my wife that except for the Advent and me looking at this thing through a lens of Jesus being the reason for the season, the commercialism of the holidays has taken away that family aspect.
Yeah.
That sitting around the table aspect. And as we've gotten older and, siblings or family members are passing and stuff, so we don't get together like we used to. I miss that. I miss sitting across from my dad, after he's been up all night long. Because Daddy would, if Christmas was Thursday, Daddy was cooking Wednesday.
Yeah.
And he'd be up all night long. And when you walked in the house, you had, as soon as the door opened, you could smell the fragrances. You know, I miss that. You
Get a
know,
whiff of it on the front porch.
yes, yeah. You know, and so I think that our younger generations, they don't understand how cooking and food in the Black community was not just about sitting at a table and eating a meal. It was about allowing your soul to connect with the rest of your family and their past and their past, and how that enriched us. I miss that, and I think that if we're going to, we Black people are really going to survive in this white supremacist oppressive society, we're going to have to reconnect with the stuff that made us who we are, because there was a strength that came from those plantations. There was a strength and a tenacity that came from those mothers who cooked while the father was out in the field, and there was a sense in which the desire to survive was directly connected to their ability to feed their spirits, their bodies, and their souls.
And Dr. Stevenson, these meals, as we keep talking about, so much greater than what was on the plate.
Yeah.
We have the stories of Fifth Sunday at our church. Fifth Sunday was dinner on the grounds at a lot of country churches.
Yep.
And we don't do that anymore. And that was such a wonderful way for people to talk to each other and share the good, the bad, what I'm not going to testify about in church, but I'm going to talk to Sister Callie Bell about. And when our young people don't know, Dr. Stevenson, we have to take responsibility for why they don't know.
Sure.
And as we have the opportunities, as God blesses us to survive this pandemic, and we're able to get back together in person, I hope that will be at the top of our agenda, even if you don't have any children. If you would take the time to gather up some people, and even if you don't want to cook, bring them in and let's see what can they make.
Yeah.
And help show them how we are supposed to be, and touching each other and creating that kinetic vibe that we used to have that helps to sustain us. And by George, that is what we need right now. As I talked about at the top of the show, there are families who don't have food. There are families who are facing eviction. There are families with loved ones who have died. There are families with loved ones who are sick. There are families that are worried that somebody is going to be sick.
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage, even as the Christmas holiday is approaching, the actual day, if at all possible, schedule a Zoom so that you can see. I mean, even if we can't touch, just to be able to see each other.
Sure enough, yeah. And there's so many different platforms. Message. You can platform message. There's a Google platform you can use. I mean, there are a number of ways of reconnecting. I think that, and I argued this years ago in the paper, that one of the worst things that ever happened to Black people was integration, because we began to integrate into the dominant culture. We forgot who we were.
Yeah.
And how important it was to connect with ourselves. And I'm not saying that we ought not connect with other people. I'm not saying at all, because I think diversity is important. But I think there's a sense in which we fuel each other. We can invest. We can teach our young people how to navigate this society when we connect. There are so many things. My parents never went to college, but my father had a lot of good common sense, man. And he told me a lot of things may help me to make some good decisions. I made some bad ones on my own, but some of the things my dad told me, he didn't learn that in university. He learned that in the world, and he told us how to make those decisions. So you're right. We need to reach back. I always talk to my students about each one teaching one, and being in a university, the town and gown idea is that we don't get this stuff in school just for school. We get it so we go back to the community. Black Studies is all about going back into your community and investing in those individuals who don't have the same kind of access that you have.
And Dr. Stevenson, as I have been in the company of my Jewish friends across the country and observed some of their holidays and their holiday feast, they're integrated, but they did not give up who they were.
Exactly.
We were the people in America who were forced to give up. And then we thought that giving it up meant that we had arrived, and we've lost so much in that giving up that it is incumbent upon us to bring it back together so that we can be important to each other. Thus, a unified picture of Black lives matter to us. So they have to matter to you because they matter to us. But let us first show how important we are to each other.
Exactly.
Dr. Stevenson?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight, talking about Southern cuisine and its heritage, what the devil meant for evil, God meant for good.
Yeah, he did.
Because we have had some incredible gatherings and continue to have incredible meals as a result of what the people, our forefathers, brought from Africa and was able to preserve even through the oppression of slavery.
Exactly. And if we could just tap back into that spirit of sacrificial community, I think we'll be all right. Because that's
certainly will not hurt. Black skillet, it is not an anti-domestic violence tool.
Right.
It's for cooking.
You know what I think I have this fish boil thing on my brain now. I'm going to have to find me a nice skillet, a cast iron pot, so I can get some seafood and I want to do a broil.
I think I have one. It may not be as big as you need. If I'll look at it and send you a picture of it, and then go find you a good old-fashioned cookbook. This is called The Old Black Pot.
Yeah.
I actually did a story on the author of this book, and she wrote a note and signed it for me, and I've used it for a number of years. But experiment, use some of these recipes. Don't be afraid, and don't be afraid in the kitchen. And as God blesses you, take this opportunity to bless others as you are preparing food. There are many agencies that would love to have a homemade something. Pie, cake, dressing. Please share with others. The song that we sang in church, you can't beat God's giving. The more you give, the more he'll give to you.
Right. And sister with the carrot cake, tell her to hit her brother up.
Millie, I will tell her. In Meaden, Tennessee, my cousin Millie. I know, huh? Yeah. All right, Dr. Stevenson. Again, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Timbuktu Report. I appreciate all of you for joining us as well. Dr. Stevenson, be well. Best of luck on the tennis court tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. We played last week and won, so we're planning on going out there and repeat.
There you go. All right. You take care. Everybody watching, whether on YouTube, Facebook, or on the podcast, the Wellness Radio TV podcast, we thank you very much for watching. And let me just also tell you that if you go to our website at thewellnessnetwork.org and hit shop, you can get our Peace Takes Practice mask as well as other things. We're not going to have a sweet potato pie sale, But we certainly would appreciate it if you could go and do some Christmas shopping on At the Wellness Network. So, Dr. Stevenson, have a good one.
You do the same.
Thank you. Give my love to Victoria.
Likewise.
And we look forward to coming together again next Thursday. And for all of you who are watching and listening, again, thank you so much for watching and listening. For the entire staff of At the Wellness Network and the Timbuktu Report, we thank you so much for watching. And remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a great moment. We'll see you next.